Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Harry. I'm back after, I think I'm just on perpetual hiatus with guest appearances for the show. When I have time, right?
Well, don't sell yourself short. I mean, I'm trying to think back when I was in that situation that you are in now, and I don't know if I'm just trying to think if I did any contributions outside of my work and my immediate family life. So you're all good. You're all good. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing anything other than work, come home, help take care of the kids, go to bed, repeat.
Lather, rinse, repeat. So, well, anyway, it will, all should be well, I guess, in the end.
It'll buff.
Oh, so there's a new verb now. Buff is now a verb.
Oh, well, that's another phrase. Just it'll buff. It'll work out. But
yeah.
This is the buff.
We are the buff, and we are the buff, and we have the world's greatest listeners, Harry. You know this because they have made us a global top 10% podcast. As usual, they can reach us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Remember, those of you out there to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review, subscribe, hit the like button, and all those other buttons that make my life go well. Tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. There's a little link in the show notes for you to buy me a coffee or Harry some, what do they call it?
More coffee.
More coffee, yeah. So one of those things. Feel free to do that sort of thing. All right, today's very happy topic.
Yes.
is suffering, sin, and death. And not necessarily in that order. We're going to try to figure out what the right order is. I think I know what the order should be, but those three things are all related. And they, I heard, here's where it starts. Okay. I heard somebody say that we spend a lot of time worrying about suffering and less about death and even less about sin. And he said that he thinks that's the wrong order. All right. So I'm going to start a little bit about suffering, and then we're going to go through death, which will be pretty quick actually. And then sin. And then we'll try to figure out what the right order for concern should be.
Sure.
How's that sound?
Yep.
All right. So I think, like I said, most people fear them in the order. The order of priority seems to be suffering, death, and then sin. We work very hard to avoid suffering. You know, there's different kinds of suffering, right? There's emotional suffering, there's physical suffering, there's probably made up suffering, but most people seem to like that because it satisfies something else, I guess. But okay, so there's suffering, and let's just think of suffering as, I guess, pain, but it can be emotional and it can be physical, right? I mean, you can
outside of your status quo.
Yeah, I think so. So, and think about, I was thinking about how much our consumer products are directed at discomfort. In particular, things like analgesics. You have a headache, Harry? Take a pill. A tummy ache? Drink this pink stuff. Are you tired, Harry? Then drink this magic potion. Oh, you can't sleep? Well, take these pills, okay? Turn on the white noise machine. Put on a warmer jacket. Waterproof your shoes. Use extra sunglasses to keep your eyes comfortable in the summer. You need a softer pillow, and maybe a firmer mattress.
Yep.
Yeah, a softer pillow, or a firmer mattress. Maybe you need a special drink cup that keeps your cold drinks cold, and another one that keeps your hot drinks hot. There are special wrappers to keep your bread fresh. You can use some sort of magic hack to keep your cut apples from turning brown, right? The trimmer for your beard has five blades in one, Harry. You can get a perfect shave. And the internet is full of of tricks to keep your toenails well trimmed. You can stop this hinge from squeaking. Use the neck pillow on the plane. Get magic shoes that tie themselves. Things are easier, softer, quieter, smoother, happier, happiest, happy time. There's no end with what they can get us to spend to make us more comfortable.
Docile.
Well, that is another thing. So those are all things to avoid, I guess, to avoid suffering. And you could even argue that I'm not sure suffering. I'm not going to go out there and say suffering is good, because I don't think it's
certainly
good.
Not fun and enjoyable, right? Like that's definitely not good.
Well, it hurts, right? And it hurts whether it's physical or whether it's emotional. And I'm not sure that I'm pretty sure it's not a good. I'm not sure it's a bad, Harry. When it's really cold outside, like, we get below 0 Fahrenheit, and you look and there are little birds scurrying around, and you see the deer and they're in the woods, and you see them and they do that shake shiver thing. And we look at them and it seems to be that they are cold, and we kind of empathize with that because we know what it feels like to be cold. But they
don't know what it's like to be nice and warm and toasty.
Yeah, well, they know what it's like hot in the summer, right? And they do that shiver thing because it keeps them warm, right? We look at it as like a thing that we don't like. I don't like the feeling of cold, Harry. Right now I'm sitting here and I have my hoodie sweatshirt on, and I like the hoodie because it has the hood, and I use it kind of like a little scarf around my neck, and I use it a lot because I don't have much hair on my head anymore. But sometimes the suffering is just it just alerts us to something that is. So the animals, when it's really cold, I'm not sure they're necessarily suffering as much as they're just dealing with the fact it's colder by doing what they do. I mean, I don't want to be cold, but you can be cold. Like, we can get
there's a difference here between suffering and being uncomfortable.
Right.
That's what you're getting at.
Yeah, I think so. And sometimes,
wouldn't you say that suffering is prolonged and brings you out of your natural state and your ability to adjust back to your natural state?
I'm trying to figure out what my natural state should be. Because my body is designed to maintain homeostasis in a broad variety of climatic conditions, so to speak. If it's hot, my body sweats. That's what it does to cool me off. And if it's cold, my little muscle fibers in my dermis, they tighten up to produce, they keep me warm by doing the shivering stuff. So I'm not even sure that. Anyway, but it's uncomfortable, right? We don't like suffering. It hurts, and we don't like the physical pain that from things like arthritis or you tear your rotator cuff, or you blow out your ACL, or you got a hangnail, or you got a finger that doesn't work right or something like that. Those are all uncomfortable things, but you learn to deal with them, and they are part of the human condition. I think the harder ones, I think, to me, are the emotional ones. Those are the ones that I'm not sure the animals have the same. I'm sure some animals do. They have emotional discomfort. They have emotional suffering, and we all have that. You think of, like, you lose a loved one, or things don't go well at work, or you discover you're not going to get the job, or the job you wanted, or the house you bid on, or something like that. That can cause emotional
distress.
Yeah, distress. And sometimes, I guess sometimes that suffering feeling is the correct response, right? I mean, you should feel sad when something bad happens to you.
Yes, yeah, you should have a response to things that bring you out of your comfort.
Right.
And that's why I said a lot of these physical things you mentioned they are more uncomfortable than they are suffering. I would imagine suffering is, at least in a physical sense, of maybe prolonged exposure to the cold in such a manner that you get frostbite.
Right. Well, that's
suffering. If you are if it's 45 degrees outside and you're just sitting there in a t-shirt and you're saying, "Oh, I wish I had a sweatshirt on. I'm suffering." No, you're not suffering. You were just uncomfortable.
Well, that's true. It's not. That's not going to kill you. And they found all those. I keep thinking back to when they used to find feral children wandering in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And that's these kids would run around in the snow without any shoes. And sometimes when I walk on the tile floor, my feet feel a little bit like I need to put my fuzzy slippers on.
So you've become domesticated.
I'm like cattle. I've become domesticated. So I don't know if suffering is good or bad. I generally think we try to avoid it, but I think it is. I think we all can agree it is a fundamental component of the human condition.
Sure.
And I think we can. I don't think necessarily you should endure more suffering than you have to. But on the other hand, I'm not sure we should spend a lot to avoid it. And by spending, I don't mean just dollars, right? There's I don't really like to take meds for things because I don't want to. I just don't want to. And they cost money. And I can use my money for other things like, I don't know, ice cream,
Sure.
or,
Yeah.
or whatever else I want to spend my money on. But I do think there's also there can be an issue with working hard to avoid suffering that can lead to more than just a cost in dollars. It can lead to a cost to your body, right? So like if you take, if you're suffering, if you are suffering some emotional trauma and you medicate that trauma with alcohol, some people avoid suffering with alcohol. That is detrimental to you physically to avoid that suffering in that fashion.
Right. Yep.
And it may also lead you to sin, which is even worse than death, right? It points you it separates you from God, and that is a bad thing as well. So if you are really if you really want to buy the new Xbox, and because you do that, because you're suffering for not having the new Xbox. Is that even a thing anymore? The PlayStation, whatever, some new thing.
Lost track.
Yeah, and you don't have the money, but the old lady next door does, and you sneak her in her house and you rob her, so that you can get the money to buy the machine to alleviate that emotional trauma you're having. That ain't good for your soul. So there's a cost to avoiding that suffering. So I worry that we are taking on early death and or sin when we try to avoid suffering and discomfort. And that is a thing to watch out for. That can be an outcome. So that's a little bit about suffering. Okay.
All right.
And the death one is going to be pretty quick because I think we know what death is. When you're dead, that's
all right. Moving on.
Okay. All right. So, and then we get to sin, which is harder. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. We're in Lent here, right? We're still in Lent as we record this, and it will drop, I think, before the end of Lent. Sin is the thing that's on everyone's mind. And so I looked this up, Harry, because there's two pieces of the sin thing that I want to talk about. I asked the catechism, there's a catechism AI bot. No, there's not really.
Please tell me there's not.
So I looked in the catechism, and catechism paragraph 1849 says, it defines sin. All right. Sin is an offense against reason, truth, and right conscience. It is failure in genuine love for God and neighbor caused by a perverse attachment to certain goods. It wounds the nature of man and injures human solidarity. It has been defined as, quote, an utterance, a deed, or a desire contrary to the eternal law. And that last little definition came from Aquinas and Augustine, both used that definition, right? So that's a sin. It's an offense. It's offense against what is reasonable, what is truthful, and what is right. and it's a failure of love for God and neighbor caused by perverse attachment to certain goods. Okay. Furthermore, sin is an offense against God, paragraph 1850. It's an offense against God. Against you, you alone have I sinned and done that which is evil in your sight. That is from Psalm 51. Sin sets itself against God's love for us and turns our hearts away from it. Like the first sin, it is disobedience, a revolt against God through the will to become like God's, knowing and determining good and evil. Sin is thus love of oneself, even to the contempt of God. In this proud self-exaltation, sin is diametrically opposed to the obedience of Jesus, which achieves our salvation. Now, that is, I could write for a lifetime
and not come up with a definition like that.
Approach that. There is some, I know a lot of our listeners are Catholic and a lot of them are not. You should get a catechism just to be able to read such wonderfully insightful things as paragraph 1850. Sin sets itself against God's love and turns our hearts away from it. So there are these definitions of sin, like it means to miss the mark, to aim wrong, all right, to turn away, to not be right aligned. And that's that statement, right? Sin sets itself against God's love and turns our hearts away from it. Sin is a turning away from God. And I think we tend to think of sin as acts, verbs, things that we do, because they are actions,
right? Yep.
Right? But there's I guess I think of themselves as they're bigger actions than just the act that's getting you in trouble. If you've ever done this, now a lot of us sin in kind of petty, boring ways. I think we do. Right? And whenever I talk to the priests that hear confessions, they always encourage us to go to confession. And if you haven't been a lot of times, don't worry, you're not that exciting. All right. So, right. And
I'm sure I've heard it before.
Yes. And I'm sure they all have. There's a lot of people out there doing a lot of things. And that doesn't mean that your sins aren't grievous necessarily, or that they're not worthy of your need to reconcile from them or get repentance from them. But they're not extraordinary. It would be difficult to have a really interesting sin that does something more other than just turn away. And I've had situations where I felt myself do that piece. All right. Now the church talks about venial sins versus mortal sins. And I felt these mortal sins, these things where you deliberately say, the big ones are ones where you know it's wrong and you do it anyway. Okay. And that is one of these deliberate, you can't see me putting the fist up or that home against, right? And giving the middle finger to God and turning away.
It's like, no, I'm going to do this anyway. I know it's wrong, but it's because I want to do it, and I am prideful, right? And that's where a lot of sin comes from. Is it all comes from pride,
right? And
it's the love of oneself, even to contempt of God,
right? And then that next sentence: in this proud self-exaltation. Okay, what a word. How is your proud self-exaltation? Sin is diametrically opposed. It is exactly in the opposite direction to the obedience of Jesus. So it is as far removed, your actions there are as far removed as they could be from the obedience of Jesus. And there's another paragraph. Paragraph 1851 says, it is precisely in the passion, which is coming up here in a couple weeks, when the mercy of Christ is about to vanquish it, that sin most clearly manifests its violence and its many forms: unbelief, murderous hatred, shunning and mockery by the leaders and the people, Pilate's cowardice and the cruelty of the soldiers, Judas's betrayal. All of these bitter to Jesus, Peter's denial, and the disciples' flight. However, at the very hour of darkness, the hour of the prince of this world, who is Satan, right? The sacrifice of Christ secretly becomes the source from which the forgiveness of our sins will pour forth inexhaustibly. like I said, I could write another lifetime and never come up with
Some
that.
good SAT words in there.
Oh, but it's the understand. That's if you really want to understand these things, you have to read that kind of thing and read it slowly. So I come to this sin stuff, and here's the things I take away from these things.
Yeah,
right?
so give me your conclusions here.
What would the
Pastor Rafe
about sin? Okay, so
Yeah.
I as an experienced sinner. Okay, the interesting things are this: one, offense against reason, truth, and right conscience. Those things that are
good, beautiful, and true.
yeah, and I keep coming to that idea of reason. Reason is, if you go back to if you read Genesis, the first thing God does is create order and a right way of doing things. That the universe is ordered. What we have has it's not hodgepodge. It's not chaos. It's not just mayhem. These things, there is reason, there is a truth, and there is right conscience. There are right ways to do things. And sin is an offensive against God. And it puts you in a position where you are now opposed to God. Right. Mm-hmm. And that makes it a bad thing. It's a turning away from God, getting the aim wrong, or missing the mark. Those are translations of the old, the Greek words for that. Keep in mind that sinning, the verb, the thing that you do, leads to being in a state of sin. So you can say their sin is both the action and the state that results, right? And the state of sin is a situation that needs to be rectified somehow. Okay. And so I saw that word and I thought, I think I know what this word means. And it means literally made right. Okay. You're in a situation that needs to be made right. You need to reconcile, literally bring yourself back together with God. You need to get reconciliation, get tied back together. And that is neat. If you have separated yourself from God, you need to come up with a way to reconcile that. Mm-hmm. Now we have a sacrament for that, right? And that's a very nice thing that we have that when it is employed properly, I guess is the right way to think about that. So sinning is a consequence of free will. And this is a thing, I've never really understood this until I read a thing last week about somebody talking about free will and how we can choose to turn from God. And if you think about what that means, since God is reason and truth and conscience, right? And the logos, the thing that
is true.
Yes, the truth, right? The truth. We can choose to turn from that. Right? And we can decide to do something different in that free will. Now, the prodigal son story is the story, and we had
so it was last week. Yep.
It was last week at Mass. We had the prodigal son story, and you and I have an episode on this. About a year ago, we talked about the prodigal son, and I don't remember which episode it was. You guys can go look that up. You guys know how to use the internet. You know what? Go ask your AI bot for the bufnagle episode on the prodigal son.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Well, the prodigal son lays this out really well in that there's a voluntary separation. The prodigal son says, "You know what? I'm going. I'm out. I don't want to be
taking all of what you have given me.
taking it all.
I'm taking it all, and I'm using it of my own accord."
Right. And so there's a pride thing in there. There's a usury thing. And like this guy's like, I'm turning my back on you and I'm walking away. And what does the father do? He says,
he lets him. Yeah.
He lets him go. And that's free will. The Garden of Eden story also shows that temptation idea. Like God says, no, you're not supposed to do that. And Satan comes up and tricks them. He says, well, surely he didn't mean that. You're going to be like gods. I mean, yeah, you'll be great. That's why he doesn't want you to do it. He's just jealous of you. He doesn't want you to be like him. And he was like, the problem is if you do this, it's going to be a problem for you. That's the thing. That's the thing.
Well, there's kind of going back to this pride thing. I forget where I saw the quote. I'm sure you've heard it before too. Is the devil fell because he was prideful and he wanted to be God.
Right.
Right. So he is, and how do you defeat pride? And you do it through humility. Right. So pride is what turned angels into demons, but humility is what makes men into angels.
Yeah. There you go. And it takes real humility. If you've ever gone to confession, That is a thing. It is an intensely humbling thing. And the prodigal son has to go through that, right? He realizes at the end, he says, I am at the absolute bottom here. I am taking care of the pigs. I'm literally in hell. That's where he is. He's in a terrible, terrible, terrible place. And he doesn't say, I'm just going to go back home, right? He says to himself while he's sitting there with the pigs, he says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to my father and I'm going to say, I have sinned against God and I have sinned against you. And I want you to treat me just like one of your servants.
I will go back to work, whatever you need me to do.
Right.
I don't deserve the same spot I was at before.
Right. So he's willing to take a pay cut, right? Or take a demotion. And so he decides he's going to do that. So he fixes that. And then he actually turns around and goes back. Right. So he turns around and he goes back, and the father sees him from far off and comes running and wraps his arms around him. And he gives the little speech. He gives the speech. He doesn't get two words out and father stops him. He says the words, I have sinned against God and against you, and please treat me like one of your servants. And he just wraps him in the cloak. And there's like all this, it's just dripping with mercy. I mean, if there were like, I imagine this dirt road just becomes covered with this puddle of mercy there. And, it takes a while for that.
It's like alphabet soup of M's, E's, R's, C's, and Y's.
Yeah, it's just mercy everywhere. And he wraps him in. He puts rings on his fingers and sandals on his feet. And he, and he does everything for him because he has returned. And I think of that setup with the turning away and then the reconciliation and the turning back. Okay. Mm-hmm. The free will thing is the thing that I find most interesting, though, because of what I read recently. Not everything, this is obviously true, not everything in nature has free will. Okay. So imagine there's a rock on the hillside. Okay. You have a rock, you have a hill. Okay. And the rock, when you put the rock on the side of the hill, it rolls down the hill, right? Gravity pulls the rock down the hill. Yep. That's what it does. It's, you could say, well, it's in its nature. That's why it does. You could say, well, there's a gravitron, or there's what do you call it? A gravity bends space time. So the rock goes down the hill, whatever you want to do, but the rock goes down the hill. Okay. It can't do anything but roll down the hill. It doesn't roll up. It can't roll around. All right. And when it rolls down the hill and it hits a log or a fallen tree or another rock, it's going to stop, and it's not going to roll down anymore because that's going to prevent it from going down. That's its nature. It doesn't decide to roll down the hill. It just rolls down the hill because that's a thing that is consistent with reason, truth, and right conscience. It just does that. Okay. But the rock doesn't think, today I think I'm going to roll up the hill. Okay. It doesn't fall. The rock does not fall up. Okay. In fact, it doesn't say, I know it's against my nature, but I'm going to do it anyway. It doesn't say that. It doesn't even have the ability to say that. It has no free will. It has no desire to roll up the hill or down or anything else. It has no appetite. It has no wants or desires. It has no thumos, no internal impetus or will to carry out its wants. And it cannot, when stopped by a log, just say, oh, I got stopped by a log. I know. I'm going to strive and I'm going to reach into my inner, and I'm going to...
my inner rockness.
I'm going to power through and I'm going to overcome this log and continue to roll down. It can't stress and strain. It can't go through suffering to achieve more rockness. It can't do any of those things. It has no appetite. It has no will, and it has no logos. It doesn't have any thought about how its nature aligns with the grand logos of the cosmos. It's a rock, right? And it can't do anything. But we're not rocks. Okay. We can decide. See, this has been very eye-opening to me this last couple of weeks. And your poor mother has been listening to me go through this time and time and time again, trying to
your daughter-in-law just looks at me and goes, and
she goes, your aunt tells your uncle, maybe you should just call Rafe and talk about those things. All right. But we are not rocks. Okay. We can decide to act against our nature as Imago Dei and do things that are inconsistent with reason, truth, and right conscience, those things that are against God. We can decide to roll uphill. Right? And that's an amazing thing to think about. Now, granted, we can physically roll up the hill by doing, no, but I'm talking metaphorically. Okay, we can roll uphill against the nature. Okay, we can choose to do that. Okay, and of course, in the rock analogy, all right, that's going to lead to all sorts of problems because that is an affront to the greater logos, to the will of God. Okay, and it puts us in a situation that must separate us from God. It must separate us from God. Sin does that. Okay, so we got suffering, which hurts, and we can kind of treat it, but there's a cost. There's death, which is one of the. I'm going to say there's three things in life.
Four final things.
There's four final things, but there's three things in life that are certain. There's death, taxes, and suffering. Okay, those are the three things.
I was going to say the Packers beat the Bears, but
yeah, every now and then that goes the other way, right? But okay. We tend to work really hard to avoid this suffering. And by doing so, like I said earlier, we either bring this untimely death or our separation from God or both. And that's a really bad thing. Those are bad. Okay, list good things, bad things. Separation from God, bad. Okay, suffering, not quite as bad. Death, kind of in between. Okay, so what we really need to work hard to do is to avoid sinning. Right? And in doing so, we're going to avoid the state of sin and we will remain close to God. And thus, when death comes, because that's certain, and when suffering comes, because that's also certain, we will still be able to find joy. Right? And that's what I think.
I have one comment because I think you summed it up quite nicely. So I've been reading a lot of Tolkien analysis.
Okay.
Right. And Tolkien was quoted as saying Lord of the Rings is fundamentally a Catholic work.
Okay.
Right. And he says it in the sense of it is not allegorical or metaphorical in the way that Chronicles of Narnia is, with Aslan being Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. But there are qualities of biblical figures in the characters, right? So that's why you can relate so many things to Catholic belief in Lord of the Rings. And one of the things that he talks about, that Tolkien really liked to talk about, was the long defeat.
Okay.
Implying that you will mess up, things will happen, you will suffer, you will find yourself in a state of sin because you are not perfect. And the only way to get through that is with divine providence. Right? You can be as good as you want, but at the end of the day, you will still need God to get all the way through.
You will suffer and die. And as we approach the Passion, those are the two things that Christ demonstrated are fully human things, right? There will be suffering. In fact, if you live the good life, it's absolutely certain you should suffer.
Right. Yep.
You're not getting out of this thing without suffering, whether it's physical pain, but mostly it's going to be emotional torment. There are things that I'm sure there are things that you carry. There are things that I carry. There are things that everybody carries that are emotional baggage and heaviness and pain on them. That it's not going away. Some of these things I can make go away, but they're going to cause other problems.
Right.
And in making them go away, sin will result. Death will always come. And then if I'm a state of sin when I die, then that's a bad thing. Let me add that to the list of bad things. All right.
Yes.
The Passion has right in it, the things to focus on are suffering and death take place in the Passion. And that's what that word means, right? Passion means suffering.
Well,
right?
and it's interesting too, because a lot of people also talk about how when you suffer, you are united to Christ's passion, right? So, like you said, you can try to go out and avoid suffering at all costs. It's just going to lead to other problems. So, in a certain manner, in a certain aspect, you must embrace your own suffering.
Right. And the thing you really want to avoid, the only thing you really have to avoid is sin. So focus on not sinning. All right. And it doesn't mean focus on trying to be a, one of these killjoy people, but focus on, like, are you aligning yourself with the will of the grand logos? Are you your rock trying to roll downhill? Or are you so prideful? You're like, you know what? I'm going to be a special rock and I'm going to roll uphill because I'm different and I want to be like a god. That you're not. So give that one up, succumb to your place, and be the best.
Be the best downhole rock that you can be.
That's right. And if you run into the log, you have an impetus, you have a will, you have thumos that can help you strive to get over the log and continue rolling down the hill. But just because the log's there doesn't mean you say, well, screw that, I'm going to back uphill. No. You still need to be consistent with the. I
guess the log in this analogy is suffering.
I guess the log is suffering. Yes, that's very good. And sin, you know what sin is?
Going back uphill.
Well, no, sin is like falling off the cliff into nothing. It's like, it's choosing. Okay, so it's choosing to do something different that takes you off the hill. And then where are you? You're just out in space in some sort of like
space rock.
You're a space rock on curved space time, trying to figure out how you're going to get back down. It's like, yeah, they are. Well, isn't that right? Isn't like hell is not like God doesn't like pick you up and throw you in hell. It's separation. It's eternal separation from the good.
A slow step towards it every single time,
and you don't realize that you're there. And it's more of what do they say? A door locked from the inside. It's like now I'm like the prodigal son could have stayed there with the pigs. He could have stayed with the pigs. He didn't. Right? He made the choice to go with the pigs, and he realized that right. That's not right. That's the rock going down the hill, hitting the log, and then deciding I'm going to go out into space. And then you know what the good rock does? The rock goes back to the hill. Go back to the hill. Be the rock on the hill, Harry.
And roll over the log.
Yeah.
All right, I want to thank all the listeners for listening and remind everyone to seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life. It's going to be a great day.